This GBVIMS video short is about configuring or customizing the GBVIMS Plus tier setting. This is the fourth in the series on Primero GBVIMS Plus. It's best to watch the overview, the navigation, then learn about cases and incidents before watching this video short. So we'll start by going back to the house metaphor in the first video of this series. As you remember, the houses are all different modules in the system, all in the Primero house. The configurations are the way we make each room unique, how we design each room. This is the configuration. We need to specifically design each room according to the module and the setting. Configurations are important because it means we have a way to design the room and save the design. There are multiple components that need to be customized or configured in the system before you start to use it. Many or most of these will be customized for you by the technical team, and after implementation should only be edited by an organizational focal point on Primero. We'll go through each one of these. First, contact information. This is where you can put contact information for the help desk for GBVIMS Plus. Next, we have the modules, and this is where you select what module you'll be using. For us, it's a GBV. Next, we have program. This section provides descriptive information about the program. Then user groups. These represent teams of users working together. For example, there may be a team of social workers in a particular refugee camp providing services to survivors. There may be another group of social workers in a different camp, and a manager of a user group will have some level of access to all of the data managed by the group of users they work with, but not to the data of a different group with a different manager. Roles. Users will have roles which define what particular users are allowed to do. For example, read records, modify records, run reports, configure the system, etc. Some examples of roles are casework, supervisor, coordinator, focal point. Along with defining what actions the user is allowed to perform, roles also limit what kind of information is visible about the individual records for a specific user. For example, a social worker may be allowed to view and edit personally identifiable information, name, age, sex, etc., about a particular client, while a GBV coordinator may only see a reduced set of information about that same person, and they may not be allowed to edit any of it. Next, agency. This is a required field. This should be your organization's name or initials. In this section, you can also configure the system so that a logo from your organization appears in the top right corner of the application. Then we have users. These are the individuals working for service provider organizations who use the system. This is where you store the user login information and the password. And then we have forms. This contains information about an individual, similar to the way you would collect information with a paper-based form. The GBV module comes with a default set of configurations and forms. These configurations can be further customized in country, if need be, but again, should be initially customized by the technical team. GBVIMS Plus can be configured by clicking on the Settings button in the header navigation bar. Several configurations will only in very rare circumstances need to be altered after implementation. This includes system settings, contact information, module, program, and agencies. These should not be regularly altered. The configuration components that will need to be changed more often include user groups, users, and sometimes roles. Each individual using GBVIMS Plus needs at least one role and one user group assignment. This will customize user access to records and functions. User groups are teams of users. These groups are usually determined by site. The value of having a user group is that if you have a case management officer who oversees 3 casework staff in Site A, you can set that case management officer to have access to all of the records of the users in her group because she's supervising them. She will not have access to anyone else's records. The principle of need to know. You may want to start by doing a role mapping in your office to determine all the staff that will interact with the system, who reports to who, and what their functions are. This will help you determine your user group structure. Next, we have roles and users. The users are the individuals using GBVIMS Plus who have a unique username and password to get into the system. Their role sets the actions they can and cannot perform, which could include read, write, export, flag, import, etc. And it also determines the data they can see, their own records, their group, or all of the records. A couple of important notes here. Roles are created to determine what action someone with that title can perform in the system. Each user must have a role, but not all roles must be assigned to a user. Some can sit in the system for future use. In this example, you can see there's more than one user assigned to a role, which is fine. There's also no one assigned to one of the roles, which is also fine. We leave that role in the system, even if it's not needed right now, because it doesn't hurt anything. And if there's a need for it in the future, we have it there and ready. Before we look at roles, let's look at what functions in the system we need to determine access to. Read. This means view. Who is able to view? Write. This means who is able to create data or enter data and edit that data. Flag. This means who is able to flag cases or incidents for some kind of follow-up. Assign. This means someone who's able to assign cases to somebody else. Refer and transfer. This determines who is capable of referring or transferring cases. Export. This determines who can bring data into the system and who can bring data out of the system. Now let's look at each of the core roles of that are pre-configured into the system. The data collector or service provider or caseworker is a social worker who is entering their cases into the system. They have access to the cases and incidents section and can read, write, flag, import, refer, transfer, and override consent. The import function is for importing referrals. They only have access to their records. The data entry role may not be needed in your setting, but it's pre-configured into the system. This role can read, write, flag, refer, and transfer, as well as assign cases. On the later point, because they are data entry and not case management staff, they may enter the case into the system and then assign it to someone else who will manage it over time. They too can only access their records. The oversight or supervisor supervises the work of casework staff. For this reason, they can read, flag, assign, refer, and transfer, as well as import and export JSON files. Exporting JSON files is for the purpose of system data backing up. This role can also read and write reports and has access to the records of the users in their group. They cannot edit any cases and cannot see names of survivors that have been hidden. The organizational program coordinator can read, flag, or import. They can also read and write reports. They can read the list of users, export the list of users, import a new list of users, or assign new users. They can access all the records in the system, but they can't see any individual level data. The organizational focal point has the most functions in the system and the most responsibilities as well. They can read, flag, export, import, assign, refer, and transfer. They can read, export, import, and assign users and roles, and they can read and write reports to all the records. When you're configuring the system, there's an order that should be followed. This makes logical sense in the system, but also helps us avoid creating system errors. We'll start with contact information, then modules, program, agencies, roles, and users. It's important to follow that order of configuration. Again, the first 4 will likely be configured for you and aren't ones that need to be changed often, if at all. That's it for this video short. As always, be responsible with your data and learn more at gbvims.com.